A very alarming statistic I came across the other day. 47% of Canadians openly admit they'll never be able to afford to retire. The vast majority of current Generation Zs or Zs admitted that they will never retire. They will openly admit that they're likely going to work until they fall over. It's a sad state of statistics, and realistically, the vast majority of those that are able to retire by the age of 62 to 65 are likely boomers or those at the very youngest years or the ages of the Generation X's, like myself, and a lot of those that I grew up with, people that were typically, born in the mid 60s to early 70s, are those right now that are possibly have even just a remote chance of retiring. Possibly not early in many cases, although I do truly believe retiring the earlier the better, because we don't know how much life we have left. But the problem is a lot of people are realizing they have to find another way. A lot of Generation Zs or Zs are finding ways to manage this predicament, this phenomenon that they unfortunately are finding themselves in. With the rising cost of living, housing, cars, food, rent, it's just getting out of control. I mean, the other day I went to McDonald's, and I don't openly admit this because I don't like eating there. To me, the cardboard box that the burger came in probably tasted a little bit better than the actual burger, in my opinion. However, I was out, I was hustling around, I needed something to eat, I was starving. So I grabbed a burger, basically a combo with a drink, fries, burger, okay? I also ordered another little side cheeseburger, just one of those little cheap little cheeseburgers you throw in there. That combination cost me almost $19. How do you like that? This is where we're at. The cost of living is no joke. And Generation Zs or Zs believe that it's no joke. They are struggling. We're all struggling. It doesn't matter what generation. If there's one thing that we all find commonalities in, it's that we're all struggling right now with the cost of living. So the idea that a lot of people are not able to retire by the age of 60, 65, maybe even by 70. A lot of this, there's different solutions now, what a lot of Generation Zs are looking at. And I openly admit, I lived a little bit of this myself years ago. So years ago, I worked for this company, not for the last recent company I just left, but one beforehand. They were a very flexible operation. They did a lot of very interesting high voltage work, which, I participated in. I loved the work, I loved the people, and it was a fun job. But basically, what I enjoyed most about that job was the flexibility. The flexibility of that job allowed me not just to work my weekly schedule. I can work days, nights. There's a lot of shifts that we had to work, but we were able to do a lot of things kind of on our schedule and our dime. If we couldn't make a job, they would find somebody else. It was pretty flexible. It was a big team. It was a very cooperative crew. Great company, actually, in retrospect. But it wasn't the weekly schedule that I loved so much about it. What it really was the fact that if I wanted to leave somewhere and go on an extended holiday, they were totally fine with it. They got it. They almost treated us like contractors, although we were permanent employees, and they had enough staff to backfill. So if we wanted to go somewhere a little bit longer, they were good with it. As a matter of fact, we did Portugal. We were there for about 6 weeks, so basically a month and a half. And the only reason we came back as soon as we did was because my wife's work had a limit on her vacation time. She was maxed out. But my company would have likely let me go longer and longer and longer. And I found that absolutely awesome. So I did have an accrued amount of vacation. And all they said was the stipulation, look, Mark, I think all we're going to have to do is you're going to have to eat the rest. We'll pay you your vacation for what you've earned, and the rest it'll be on your dime. I was fine with that. Sounds fair to me. Just the fact that they were being flexible was all I really looked for and all I really wanted. So off we sailed off to Portugal, the Azores. My wife's from the islands. It's in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, a gorgeous little spot. If you've been to Hawaii, just think of it this way. This is ×3 or ×4. It's absolutely spectacular. I'm not trying to bring any limelight to it other than the fact that I still can't believe that we live here when a place like that exists, and we have a citizenship available to get us there. And realistically, it's just more about, raising the family. And that's a big part of why we're not necessarily making the move just yet. But that vacation was full of total fun and frivolity. But I truly believe we're a product of our environment. And that's what this place was all about. In my mind, I had never been there before. Our first vacation there, you know what, we spent 6 weeks living on the beach. You know what, it was wonderful because I didn't know the language. I started to learn a little Portuguese. I started to talk to some of the locals, hang out with the locals, play cards, drink some red wine, you know what, and learn some of the basic language. We'd go for walks along the beach. We'd go swimming from time to time. We did tours around the island, our own personal tours, because of course that's where, you know, my wife's originally from. So we sort of knew all the back roads and all the secret spots and this mountainous terrain that is nothing short of breathtaking. When I saw this, I mean, I can't even explain to you how spectacular the scenery is there. You picture this scenario. You have a mountainous volcanic type island and it comes up to a peak. Just picture that. You've seen the pictures. Okay, you drive on this road that's basically a switchback, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And you get to this point of this island, you're at the peak of the island. The road takes you all the way up there. It's all greenery. It's like sweeping mountainous sides that flow down into the ocean, an absolute gorgeous environment. And I'm at the peak of this island and I'm looking down. I'm looking down one side and I'm seeing one shoreline, and I'm looking over the other way and I'm seeing the other shoreline. I'm basically looking across the island and it is nothing short of breathtaking. I've got the sun beaming through these clouds. I was in sheer awe. And we lived this, we enjoyed it. I still to this day, I loved it. We ended up going there, spent 6 weeks. We went there another few years later, and of course I've been there a couple times now, and it's nothing short of breathtaking, okay? But the big storyline here isn't the fact of how great the scenery is, because we all find those little spaces, and it may not be like that. It might be this great little stream where we like to do a little brook fishing, or we might like to sit out on the lake. Possibly we might have our own little spot, maybe some hiking trails that nobody really goes or knows about. It doesn't matter. The point is, it's something new. And it's something that you can't necessarily fly over and say, I saw it. It's something you have to experience and witness. And see, that's what life is. It's a culmination of our experiences, the things that we learn, we see, we enjoy. But you can't do that on a 1 week, all-inclusive paid vacation to Mexico. It generally doesn't work like that. All you can do is get in there, crash course, double fist a few drinks, go home. That's really what that is. But to really enjoy some of these environments, what I find is you have to go there for a while. You have to immerse yourself in the culture. We didn't stay in downtown hotels or high rises. We stayed in one of the relatives' homes, or they lent it out to us. And so we were in the culture. We were in the community. We were in the village. Okay, San Miguel, if anybody's curious, San Miguel in the Azores, and I'm probably saying it wrong, and I know I will be corrected, one of the most beautiful islands, okay? So, with that said, I want to just continue on the conversation, because now what's starting to happen is a lot of this new generation, Gen Zs, well, specifically, are realizing that the cost of living, of course, housing costs are going through the roof. Many people figure that they can't even afford to buy a house, or if they can, they'll be basically house poor for the next 100 years. It might be a generational home, and it absolutely, it's heartbreaking to kind of hear how we've gotten to this point where, you know, if a person that goes to, you know, college, university, gets a great job, comes out, you know, makes a top tier wage and still can't afford to buy a house. How did we get here? But we're here. And so a lot of this Generation Z or Z is realizing there's got to be a better way. So what they're doing now is a little thing called micro-retirement. And this micro-retirement is nothing more, nothing really less, other than finding blips in the radar throughout your working career where you're able to get away from work, where you're finding a mutually beneficial trade-off between you and your employer that allows you to get away for an extended period of time, take a break. I mean, a real break. See, because a lot of these Gen Zs are now thinking, I'm not going to be able to retire at 65, probably going to be to the bitter end. But as long as maybe instead of waiting till the very end, maybe a better option would be taking nice, extended, long vacations throughout, sporadically spaced throughout my life. I think it's a wonderful idea because that's when you want to enjoy. You want to enjoy it when you've got good health and you've got the vitality and the energy and you just want to go and explore. You're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. You see cool things and it just lights up your day to see a new piece of scenery or something new and exciting. And I could totally understand and get behind why a lot of the youngest generation in the workforce now are starting to think about this as a better option than, head down and just working their way into retirement. See, because, ultimately, I truly believe, retiring at 50, 55 is, in my mind, for me, it was optimal because I feel like, I worked hard, I doubled down, opportunistic, looking for, work and earn as much as I possibly could. And then finally get myself to a position where, I can maybe semi-retire or do a side hustle and it can transition me into retirement. And so that for me is the best way. I just feel like nobody should have to work till they're 72. To me, that just feels wrong. So unfortunately, this current generation is one of which, and even some millennials are believing that they'll never afford to be able to permanently retire. So what else can they do? So when I heard about this new thing, this new trend of work environments, it absolutely blew me away. I thought this is absolutely magnificent. There are some trade-offs, however, and you have to think about this. It's not something you just drop it cold turkey. What I was kind of studying about this and researching is that the idea of trying to do these long breaks, and I'm talking maybe 12 months, 18 months, maybe as much as 24 months at a time, it means there's a commitment. And so a commitment from both you and your employer. First of all, you've got to be working for an employer that has that level of flexibility sort of embedded in their workplace. Not all employers will allow that. The last company I worked for wouldn't even dream of that. They were so rigid, they sort of lock you into your fixed vacation, and that wasn't really an option. So for many, it's not an option. And for many, it might be, toggling your career to find an employer that has that type of flexibility built in. But for mine, my last employer wasn't like that. The one before it certainly was. So the first thing is having an employer that will give you that type of flexibility and give you the ability to walk away for 2 years, maybe a year and a half, maybe even just a year to break away. You need to have that flexibility. Second to that, you've sort of got to be thinking about, okay, how am I sustaining this sabbatical? How am I doing this? How am I making this actually work financially? You need money to travel, right? We all need money to travel. So something you sort of have to be planning for, right? So if you want to do this, let's say every 5 years, every 10 years, you want to do these types of getaways, then the idea behind that is you've got to start planning towards it. Work with your employer. And what seems to be a typical go-to is a lot of these people that are engaging in this type of shortened or extended vacation is they're doing one in which they're sort of having their company help facilitate budgeting. So they might live off of 2/3 of their income while they're working. So maybe they work for 5 years, working for 2/3 of their typical salary, and the other third, they will get redirected into another space. So that it's automatically budgeting, because you have to have money aside. Money just, unfortunately, I wish it grew on trees, but it doesn't. So the idea of having a bit of money set aside comes in a way of that type of budget. So work for a few years, like I said, trim some off the bottom and put that to the side. Don't touch it. The other thing you have to be thinking about, first of all, when you're younger and you're doing these types of getaways, usually you're in better health in most cases. And as a result, that offers other rewards, some of which is lower travel insurance, lower healthcare costs. And so always, if you're traveling, you've got to have insurance. Do you have car insurance? Maybe you're renting a car where you're going. Maybe you're going to rent a car for a year while you're there. You got to make sure that you've looked at all the insurance costs associated with a rental car, your life insurance, health insurance. What's the political system like there? What's the volatility like wherever you're going? Maybe you're going to a country, you're exploring something that's a little bit volatile. You know, I've been to countries too where there was a lot of political unrest, and it was really put you on the edge of your seat, just worrying every time you're on the roadway and you see a group of people standing there that look like they're just hanging around. I've been in those types of environments. So you've got to make sure you're well researched, know where you're going, put the budget aside, have travel insurance, health insurance, life insurance for that. And again, just have that money budgeted. And that way you can go plan your getaway and do so in a which that is a peace of mind. It doesn't leave you stressed out or worried about anything that you might be missing, because you know what, that's the last thing you need, is have something happen while you're overseas or in a spot that it's hard to get a hold of some support or help, or maybe, you know, even communication out of there is poor. You want to make sure that you're well researched on where you're going, and that understand the crime rates and all of those factors. But that's a logistic. That's neither here nor there. What I'm basically saying is this Generation Z or Z is one that clearly seems to be thinking outside the box. And while some of these folks may believe that they'll never be able to retire, and it's unfortunate because there's a growing trend that way, with conversations about Social Security getting bumped back, with the age, the qualifying age getting risen higher. Same thing with CPP and the pensions in Canada. There's conversation, depends on the government, in a week there's conversations about possibly raising the qualifying age of that as well. That doesn't put anybody in a confident spot.